Picture this. You just landed at JFK after 5 long months away from home. You are exhausted, jet-lagged. All you can think about is getting back to your apartment, your bed, your normal life. You walk through the terminal like you have done a dozen times before. You stand in line at immigration. When it is finally your turn, you hand the officer your green card, confident, calm, expecting the usual quick nod and a wave through. But this time, something is different. The officer scans your card, the machine beeps, and instead of that familiar nod, he pauses. He stares at the screen. His expression shifts in a way that makes your stomach drop before a single word is spoken. He looks back at you and says 2 words you were not expecting. Step aside. A second officer approaches holding a small tablet. He gestures toward a camera mounted at the booth. Face forward. Do not move. Do not smile. A flash. Your photo is taken. You assume it is routine. Just standard security. Just another box being checked. But what most travelers do not realize in that moment is that the photo is not simply a picture. It is the entry point into a biometric tracking system that has been quietly monitoring every time you enter or leave the United States. And in the last few months, something new has started happening at airports all across the country. Green card holders who assumed everything was fine are suddenly being flagged the moment their card is scanned. A red indicator appears on the screen. A number appears next to their name. Sometimes it says 183 days, sometimes 190, sometimes more. And then the officer asks the one question that has the power to change everything. Why were you outside the United States for so long? What happens in the next 5 minutes can determine whether you walk out of that airport and go home, or whether your green card is taken and your entire future in America suddenly becomes uncertain. What you are about to learn. Welcome to US Green Card Signal, the channel where Edward breaks down everything you need to know about protecting your status, your rights, and your future in the United States. If you are a green card holder or planning to travel outside the country for an extended period, you need to watch every second of this video. Because what Edward is going to explain is already affecting permanent residents at airports right now. And most people have no idea until they are standing at that inspection booth, exhausted and completely off guard. By the end of this video, you are going to understand 3 critical things. First, what the new biometric system actually does every time you enter or leave the United States. Second, why green card holders are being flagged more frequently. And third, the exact communication strategy immigration attorneys recommend when answering questions at the airport, so you do not accidentally create problems for yourself in a moment of panic. Many green card holders who run into serious trouble at the airport did not break any laws. They simply did not understand how their travel history would look inside the government system. Once you understand how this works, the entire situation becomes something you can navigate calmly instead of something that blindsides you. The rule that changed everything. December 26, 2025. To understand why this is happening more often now, you have to start with one specific date, December 26, 2025. On that date, the Department of Homeland Security expanded something called the Biometric Entry-Exit Program. The name sounds technical, but the change behind it is genuinely significant, and every green card holder traveling internationally needs to understand it. For years, the U.S. government collected fingerprints from many travelers entering the country, but now the system has expanded far beyond fingerprints. Under the updated rule, facial recognition photography is now mandatory every single time a non-U.S. citizen enters or exits the United States. When you arrive at an airport, the camera you are facing is capturing a full biometric facial scan. When you leave, the same thing happens at departure. This does not only apply to tourists or visa holders, it applies to nearly everyone who is not a U.S. citizen, including lawful permanent residents. Green card holders, international students, temporary workers, even groups previously exempt from older biometric systems are now included. Children as young as 14, elderly travelers who had never been subject to this kind of screening before. The goal from the government's perspective is straightforward. Create a reliable biometric identity match every time someone crosses the border so that travel records are more accurate and immigration violations are detected more efficiently. But the reason this matters so deeply for green card holders has less to do with the photograph itself and everything to do with the data connected to it. What the system sees the moment your card is scanned. Every time that camera captures your image, the system links your photo to a specific travel event, a departure, an arrival, a location, a date. Over time, these events build a detailed digital timeline of your movements in and out of the United States. The system does not rely on manual records. It does not depend on passport stamps that might be faded or missing. Instead, it builds an automated travel history that any officer can access instantly the moment your green card is scanned. The data collected is not temporary. According to the policies governing this program, the information can remain stored for decades, in some cases up to 75 years. Every travel record becomes part of a long-term federal database. When you enter the country, the system records the time, the airport, and the identity confirmed through your biometric photo. When you leave, the same thing happens again. For tourists, this data helps identify visa overstays. For temporary workers, it verifies compliance. But for green card holders, the implications carry completely different weight. Permanent residency is built on a specific legal expectation. You are supposed to maintain your primary residence in the United States. That expectation has always existed, but in the past it was sometimes harder for officers to see the full picture immediately during a brief inspection. That uncertainty is gone now. When your green card is scanned today, the officer does not need to ask how long you were away. The system displays the exact number of days before you say a single word. If you left and returned 187 days later, that number is on the screen. And when that number crosses certain thresholds, the inspection changes. What was routine becomes a legal evaluation of whether you maintained your residency obligations. The 6-month misunderstanding that traps good people. This is where green card holders need to understand something immigration attorneys repeat constantly, but many people never fully absorb until it is too late. A green card gives you the right to live permanently in the United States, but that right is grounded in the legal expectation that the United States is actually your primary home. The government expects that a lawful permanent resident lives mainly inside the United States and only travels abroad temporarily. That does not mean you cannot visit family overseas or take extended trips. Millions of permanent residents do exactly that every year without any problems. The issue arises when a trip becomes long enough that officers begin to question whether the United States is still your main residence. This is where the famous 6-month guideline creates so much confusion. Many people believe there is a strict rule that if you stay outside the United States for more than 6 months, you automatically lose your green card. That is not how the law works. There is no automatic cancellation at the 6-month mark. However, once an absence crosses that time frame, it can raise questions about whether you truly intend to maintain the United States as your home. And those questions are precisely what immigration officers are trained to evaluate. In the past, officers had to ask multiple questions just to piece together a basic travel timeline. Dates were unclear, histories were incomplete, but with the biometric system now automatically linking each entry and exit event to a verified identity, that uncertainty has been eliminated. The timeline is on the screen, precise, documented, and instead of spending time establishing how long you were gone, the officer's attention shifts immediately to a different and far more serious question. Why were you gone that long? why talking too much is the most dangerous mistake. Once that question appears on the screen, the situation can escalate very quickly. And this is the exact scenario playing out at airports every day. A permanent resident returns after several months abroad, maybe caring for an aging parent, maybe dealing with a family emergency, maybe they simply stayed longer than planned and did not realize how the timeline would look when they returned. From their perspective, they are simply coming back home. But the travel record on the officer's screen has raised a flag that must be evaluated. At that moment, most people assume the best approach is to explain everything. They describe a family member's illness in detail. They talk about business responsibilities overseas. They apologize for staying longer than expected. But inside that inspection booth, the conversation is not casual. It is not happening in a sympathetic setting. It is happening inside a legal framework where every statement can be interpreted through immigration law, carefully documented and referenced later. This is why experienced immigration attorneys warn permanent residents about something that feels completely counterintuitive. Sometimes the biggest mistake a person makes at the airport is talking too much, not because honesty is wrong, but because unstructured explanations can unintentionally build a narrative suggesting your real life now exists outside the United States. Imagine an officer asks why you stayed abroad so long. Your instinct is to tell the honest story. Your mother was seriously ill and you stayed to take care of her. Anyone would understand that reason. But the officer's job is not to evaluate your intentions emotionally. Their job is to determine whether your residence is still centered in the United States. So when they document your answer, they may not write a warm personal story. They may record, "Traveler remained abroad to care for family member." In immigration law, that sentence can be interpreted as evidence that your primary obligations are located outside the United States. Consider another common response. Someone explains they stayed longer because they were handling business or property matters overseas. The officer may record that as maintaining economic ties abroad. That phrase carries specific weight because one of the key questions officers examine is whether a permanent resident's financial and professional life is primarily based in another country. Even saying you did not realize the trip had gotten so long can work against you. An officer might note that the individual appeared unaware of residency obligations. When statements like these appear together in an inspection record alongside the confirmed travel timeline already displayed by the biometric system, they create a picture suggesting your real life may be somewhere other than the United States. How the law actually protects you. Here is something critically important. Immigration law does not allow a single number of days to define whether someone abandoned their residency. The law applies what is called the totality of circumstances test. Officers and immigration judges are required to look at the complete picture, not just one number. The factors they evaluate include whether you maintain a job inside the United States, whether you file U.S. tax returns as a resident, whether you have a home or apartment here, whether your immediate family lives in the country with you, whether you maintain active bank accounts and daily life connections here, and whether you always intended to return to the United States as your primary residence even while temporarily abroad. In many situations, travelers who spent extended time abroad still have strong evidence showing their life remains firmly anchored in the United States. Employment waiting for them, a lease they maintained, tax filings confirming residency, family members living with them. Those factors are powerful legal protections. The challenge is that this test is meant to evaluate a full set of documented facts, not a rushed conversation at a